Welcome to the latest edition of Dynamic Political Centrism, hosted by Alan Steinberg, produced by Dr. Yonatan Yoni Yaris. Our guest tonight, Staci Berger, President and CEO of the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey.
I am Alan Steinberg, the voice of Dynamic Political Centrism. On our podcast show, our listenership is going way up, and that is a tribute to all of you out there. We have a very special guest tonight, one of the real influential figures in New Jersey government and politics, Staci Berger. Let me say this before I get to her, but she is on the side of the angels. She furthers a cause. I mean this. I've admired her for a long time. We've seen each other. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to talk to her in person. So, Staci, thank you so much. Before I get to that, I would be remiss if I didn't mention two things on a personal level. You see me wearing green today. I wore green last week. The Eagles have triumphed. Yay! And last week I had a few shows where I talked about the game, talked about sports, and I have been known for years in my sports prediction for something called the Steinberg jinx. Every team I picked to win lost. Yesterday was the end of the Steinberg jinx. So as we say in Yiddish, I deserve a mazel tov for that. And I'm still wearing the green today. I wish I could have been in Philadelphia last night celebrating, but I probably never would have gotten home to do this show. Secondly, I have the best granddaughter in the world. Thank God. She should always live and be well. She said this weekend, she said, "Grandpa, I love you, but you need to get Riz." I had no idea what Riz is. Evidently, it's kind of a term being with it. She's a young girl approaching the age of 10. She's really with it. So if any of my listeners can contact me and explain what Riz is, I'll be delighted because I need to get Riz. But in any event, I'm delighted to be here tonight with Staci Berger. As I've said before, she is on the side of the angels. She is the president and chief executive officer of the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey. They work for the cause of affordable housing for all races, colors, and creeds. Staci, you can look at pride in your career, and I thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you so much for that lovely and warm introduction. It's an honor to be here and really great to get to talk with you, not just passing each other in the halls at the State House for a change. Can't say that I was rooting for anybody in particular last night. I was rooting for a good game, so I'm glad that the Eagles folks are very happy, and congratulations to you. And I'm glad that you broke your streak, Mazel Tov, or your curse rather, I guess. Mazel Tov to that. And so I'm glad for that. I cannot help you at all with your granddaughter's, language request that you get more Riz. I don't know what that means. So
I looked it up. I looked it up on the internet. It sort of means charisma and with it. And I am an old man of 75 with very young energy. So I won't change, but I will never stop loving this kid. So
and who would want you to? She sounds amazing. Congratulations.
she is amazing. Anyway, I have to commend you on something else. I prepare for these shows by looking at the websites, looking up on the internet, and basically looking at the bios of people. Your organization, the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey, I feel like giving an award because I think you have the best website and most informative website that I have seen, which is important.
Thank you.
That's important to get your cause out there.
It is, and I can only take I can take very little credit, except that I have great colleagues who do terrific work. So I will make sure that they receive those accolades because they are the people doing the day to day. Nobody wants me to be have anything to do with the technology, which is the best.
I have a similar issue, as you know. I have one of the finest producers of high technology programs and productions in Dr. Yonatan Yaris, who is my producer. I call him Doc because he is a doc of technology. So thanks to the doc, I'm able to do this show every week. He just had his 7th child, so I have made it clear to him that we will not have any guests from Planned Parenthood here accompanying him on the show. So we can do the Planned Parenthood guest as a separate show. But I wish him again a mazel tov, and thanks to his expertise, we're here on the show tonight and able to transmit this to thousands of New Jerseyans and people across the state borders. But let me read you how your website describes the organization, because I can't top this. It's a superb website. But what it says is, since 1989, the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey has worked to improve the environment for the work of community development corporations, that's the CDCs, and to strengthen their capacity to create housing and revitalize distressed neighborhoods throughout New Jersey. Before I go on, what I really laud you for, and this is timely, this is Black History Month. And as you have mentioned so accurately, institutional racism is a terrible force to keep this state segregated in terms of housing patterns, to keep people of color from having the opportunity to have decent housing in a decent neighborhood with all the amenities that people are entitled to in the state of New Jersey. So you are a hero of this, and I'll go on and read a few other things here, but I can't stop commending you for that.
Well, that's very kind of you. I am very grateful and honored to get to do this work with tremendous allies and colleagues. There are a lot of people pushing very hard to make sure that we have the kind of housing affordability, security, and stability that New Jersey residents need and deserve from wherever they are, whether they're from here or they come here, that everyone has the right to a safe, affordable place to call home. We believe that housing is a human right and that everybody should have that opportunity to live safely in the neighborhood of their choice.
And
So
you're
it's really,
making that
it's just an honor and a tremendous privilege for me to get to do this work. So maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel like I deserve,
no, but you're making
a lot
this
of
easy.
accolades for doing something that shouldn't need doing because we shouldn't be here in the first place. We're really trying to undo 400 years of institutional, segregation and a legacy of racism in New Jersey, which had been formerly, has been known as the slave state of the North. I mean, we were the last state to really address slavery itself, and have been a long time coming in addressing the results of it, including addressing reparations.
Well, you have stated that so accurately, because the effects of racism and ongoing racism are still here in our society. And organizations like yours are bringing to a closer range a society which will envision what Dr. Martin Luther King wanted, where we will be judged on the content of our character rather than the color of our skins. Go ahead.
Dr. King also talked about building a beloved community out of chaos and, choosing between chaos or community. And it feels like we are in that moment right now where we really need to decide whether we're going to choose chaos or, in, our view, that we choose a beloved community where we care for, nurture, and support each other so that everyone thrives.
Well, you just said it all, because we are in the era of Donald Trump. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't comment on this. Affordable housing is something that Donald Trump would oppose with every fiber of his being. He is a candidate of racism. He is a candidate of fascism, as I've stated in my articles. And people like you are fighting the good fight, and you're going to win the good fight to keep our society on an honorable path. Let me read a few other things that you do. I don't think you give yourself enough credit, but wow. I don't know how you ever get home in the evenings. I don't know how you have time to breathe. But here is some of the work that the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey does. The network is a statewide association of over 250, that's a lot, nonprofit housing and community development corporations, individual professional organizations, and prominent New Jersey corporations that support the creation of housing choices and economic opportunities for low and moderate income community residents. And that is a vital cause. And I know the success you have had in this down through the years. Finally, the website goes on to say, this network and its members share a commitment to promoting economic justice, which is such a key. Economic justice. I'm in the environmental field. As you know, I was a Region 2 EPA administrator. Environmental justice and housing justice, and I'll get to this a little later, go hand in hand. And
Yep.
You are furthering the housing justice cause. But you have a commitment to promoting economic justice and the empowerment of low-income individuals and communities, and encouraging wider participation in the framing and implementation of public policies. You support CDC members. What you do is you provide technical assistance, and also the educational programs, additional resources, and improved public policies, and conducting research on how to further the cause. Let me just mention one thing. In preparation for this show, and I was delighted that you accepted. We also had the other night Sheena Collum,
I
who
saw.
just a great lady.
Sheena's amazing.
I hope you enjoyed the show.
I did.
We were trying to contribute in our own way to the cause of affordable housing, but this is a mayor who is working with. I have gone out there. You can't say this. You're a 501c3. I've actually advocated her as the Democrat running mate for lieutenant governor. Now you can't take a position on that, but she merits it. She is that great of a mayor. And the fact that she has gotten behind the cause of affordable housing, we need other mayors to do that, in my view.
We definitely do. Sheena is a tremendous leader, both in her municipal capacity and also as the state director of the New Jersey APA chapter. And she is someone who I am proud to consider a friend. And I think she is a great human being.
Totally. Now, I've got to ask you one thing before I go a little into the history of, and if I get any of the history wrong, please correct me, because I want to give a brief history of Mount Laurel, Builder's Remedy. I want to get a good grade from you on my homework assignment, which I gave myself, okay? But the law was changed last year. Now, this was what was amazing to me. I called people I knew. I served in the Whitman administration, which seems many moons ago right now. But I called some people I knew who were involved in affordable housing back then, and they knew almost nothing about the new law that was passed last year. That, correct me again if I'm wrong, it removed authority from the Council on Affordable Housing, basically eliminated that, and put the entire fair housing program under DCA. Do I have that correct?
Just about. I would give that a B plus.
Oh, I want an A, but I'll work harder.
Okay, so
next time.
For an A, the key piece of information there, Alan, is that that A4S50, which is the legislation that you're referencing, that codified what's referred to as the Jacobson methodology. That's Judge Jacobson, who really set the parameters for how municipalities needed to calculate their housing needs when the Council on Affordable Housing was moribund. So just tiny bit more history there.
Give them all the history you want. Seriously.
Right. Okay. Governor Christie, among one of his very first acts, he came in with an executive order stack ready to go. And one of those things was to gut the Council on Affordable Housing. He basically rendered it useless, refused to appoint people, gutted it by executive order. Folks went to court, especially the very talented legal folks at Fair Share Housing Center, with whom we are proud to work closely. They went to court, and over the course of, I think, 5 years, 6 years, basically forced the Christie administration to come to the table, and they got the court to set up rules for how towns could participate in Mount Laurel so that they had builder's remedy and that we could build homes that people desperately need, that they can afford, that are in communities of their choice. And so that method is what is codified in that legislation, so that we weren't coming up with a new system for designing the numbers. They basically took the process that Judge Jacobson set up and passed that, and then put that process into play under the jurisdiction of the Department of Community Affairs.
I'm glad that you clarified that, but I suspect that you were spending a lot of time ever since the new act was passed explaining it to municipalities and interested parties.
We definitely are. We have some folks who are out doing presentations in communities. I know the League of Women Voters has been organizing forums for people to learn about how the law works. I know that other local organizations have also been organizing events in their communities to make sure that people understand how the law will work. It is actually in practice right now. We had about over 400 municipalities pass ordinances in the last month, either affirming the number that they had been provided by the calculations under this methodology, or objecting to them in some way, one way or another, or outright refusing. But for the most part, from what I understand, is that the vast majority of the municipalities that are being affected by this understand the process because they've been through it now already once. It's essentially the same process as we would have had in the decade and a half, where didn't really function.
Well, I'm going to give a
So they're
brief.
familiar. They should be familiar, and it's been on the books for almost a year. It's almost a year that the governor signed it. Governor Murphy signed the law. Unfortunately, I was out of state when that happened, but it was signed at the middle of March, so they've had a fair amount of time to plan for this. And there's more time for them to address shortcomings if they think there are some in their numbers, or they think that there's a problem. There's an opportunity for the towns to, negotiate a little bit.
Well, I'm glad that the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey is there to answer any questions, because you are the great clearinghouse of information. The Fair Share Housing Center, as I understand it, is involved in litigation against municipalities that are not complying with the Fair Share and the statutes on that, correct?
Fair Share Housing Center is the only entity in New Jersey that's principal mission is to enforce Mount Laurel. And so they do that. They also encourage towns to do the right thing without litigation. So there's litigation is one option that
So
they
we're
use.
very fortunate in New Jersey that what we have basically is a partnership between your organization and the Fair Share Housing Center that, you really can get the message and mission across.
We certainly try. And we work with lots of other organizations as well, between, not just Fair Share and the network. There are lots of folks out there really doing great work to advance the solutions to making sure that everyone has an affordable place to live.
Well, let me ask you this. I remember way back when, and I'm going to get into the history in a little bit, and I'm going to want you to correct me if I fail to state something or misstate anything. No, you are Professor Berger today. I have just given you a professorship.
I will take it.
Well, the reason your cause means so much to me, when I was at EPA, I became a very strong advocate of environmental justice. The idea is that people of color find themselves damaged far more by bad environment. In fact, a lot of companies basically will dump in areas where there are people of color. They bear the burden, they bear the health costs more than anybody else. And people of color, and this is particularly true in this month of Black History Month, they are bearing the burden of very bad housing opportunities. And so I feel that between people like myself in the environmental area, my good friend Jeff Tittle, who is back to affordable housing, and but I'll get to something in a minute where I think he actually can enhance the cause, and people like yourself that are eliminating, striking down barriers, discriminatory barriers against people. So I feel that our causes have a commonality, and as long as we're together, we're going to have success. But when this first started, I was a new resident of New Jersey with Mount Laurel 1 back in 1975, which basically outlawed exclusionary zoning. Zoning was often done, and again, correct me if I'm wrong on this. I remember the pattern was to zone lots that were so big that they were so expensive that people, minority groups, people working their way up couldn't afford that kind of housing. And so ordinances like that had really large lot sizes or really large, I think they used to call it McMansions that were located.
Well, it was before that even. The Mount Laurel decision is named for the town where the mayor told a group of NAACP and church leaders that if they couldn't afford to build the housing the way the zoning was set up, then they could move somewhere else, that they didn't have to live there. And the court found that under New Jersey's constitution, a municipality cannot use its zoning laws to exclude people, and that's what the mayor and the council in Mount Laurel had tried to do. And so that's the underpinning of the constitutionality of Mount Laurel. I am not a lawyer. I'm not really a professor, but
I just gave you the professorship. Go on, take it.
Professor. Okay, but that's where the name of the case law comes from, because it was this township of Mount Laurel that refused to zone for garden apartments that Ethel Lawrence and her colleagues in church and in the NAACP in that community wanted to build, and they just simply would not approve them. And so they went to court. And So
Well,
it was before even the rise of McMansions. It was just that it was not only that the lots were so large in other communities and in that community, but that they refused to use their zoning laws to provide a reasonable opportunity. And so for the creation of affordable homes, there's a perception that the towns themselves have to build the housing, and that's not quite accurate. Under the Mount Laurel case law and the decisions, and even upheld in the latest legislation that we were talking about, what it really comes down to is that a town can't exclude people using its zoning rules, that it must allow for people to move in if they want to, and to build a variety of homes for people at a variety of incomes. So the language in Mount Laurel in the case law is that towns must create a reasonable opportunity. So they can't make something that's impossible for anyone to ever build, and they can't use their zoning to keep people that they don't necessarily want to have in their community out. And that's the part that I think is so important for where we are right now, because we know that there are communities who still in 2025 are suing to try to keep people out of their neighborhoods. There are 24 municipalities, primarily white, very wealthy in northern New Jersey primarily, that are suing to try to stop this law. Fair Share Housing folks have done their job in court and kept them from being able to get their way. They are going to have to participate in this system, or they risk, as you talked about, violating the builder's remedy law,
Well,
builder's remedy opportunity.
you have just said it all. And some people may think I'm engaged in hyperbole, but I'm involved very much. I'm a history freak. If you go into my apartment, there's no room to walk around because there's so many history books all over the place. That's an admission against interest. Okay. But I have studied at length the famous Brown versus Board of Education decision that outlawed segregation of schools. And it was a landmark for African Americans in American history. I think in terms of New Jersey history, the initial Mount Laurel decision and Mount Laurel 2 have played a similar role in making
That's
possible.
Right. And that's exactly right, Alan. And, historians refer to Mount Laurel as the second most important civil rights case after Brown versus the Board of Education across the country. We're the only state in the nation that has that constitutional underpinning, where we know that the law supports making sure that everyone has a safe, affordable place to live in a community of their choice, and that municipalities can't use their zoning laws to keep people out. And that's really what this comes down to, is to make sure that municipalities are treating everybody fairly.
I'm delighted that you said that. Absolutely delighted, because that brings across the importance of the Mount Laurel decision, not only in terms of New Jersey history, but it set a landmark for other states to follow. You so accurately described exclusionary zoning. And basically, when the mayor of Mount Laurel said, hey, go take a hike, I used to live near Mount Laurel. I used to live in Cherry Hill and Voorhees before that. And it was a shock to me that right in my backyard, this was happening. But he was unequivocal, the mayor. And this was a cause that really damaged a lot of people trying to work their way up in society and get better housing for their families.
Well, housing is the way that most people in America, and certainly in New Jersey, generate generational wealth. That's how we build wealth. It's what we use, if we can, to send our kids to college, if we're able to do that. It's how we retire, right? It's generally considered how people generate their family wealth. And if you can't afford to buy a home and your rent is out of control, and we know, I'm sure we're going to get to that, the rent is very, very high. It's deeply problematic. And we know that it continues to exacerbate racial segregation and that dynamic in our state. The wonderfully talented lawyers and policy advocates at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, under the leadership of Ryan Haygood, have demonstrated over and over again through their research that we are seeing the impact of that financially, where white families have about $325,000 worth of wealth. Black families have $17,000. That's not an accident. It didn't just happen. Latino families have about $23,000, $24,000 worth of family wealth. So, white families are are much, much, much better off than most people of color in our state. And it's directly tied to our housing market and opportunities that people have not been afforded for the last couple of 100 years.
You've made that abundantly and explicitly clear. And I think that the struggle for decent housing is the present frontier of the civil rights movement. And it's something that we all have to get behind. But let me go to Mount Laurel too, and then I'll ask you for an evaluation as to how much progress you think we have made in terms of the cause of affordable, non-segregated housing. In 1983, Mount Laurel 2 came down. And basically, what this provided for was that all the towns, it really codified remedies here. It required each of the towns to take their fair share of affordable housing. Because before that, there was just a general mandate that, hey, towns have to stop exclusionary zoning. But this was something affirmative. It was a marvelous decision. At the time, now I'll never forget this because Tom Kean was not a racist. Tom Kean was one of the great governors of New Jersey. But obviously, he was concerned about the public impact. He was very much a politician. And he said at the time he thought that decision was communistic. I think he later regretted that, although he never would say so. But it was far from communistic. It fit in with free enterprise America. And I say that for one overall reason. And that was the builder's remedy. As I understand it, the builder's remedy would give a right to developers to force towns to have a variety of housing, particularly multifamily developments. But there would have to be something like 1 unit of affordable housing to every 4 of market rate housing. Is that basically the initial guideline on that?
I can't speak to what the guideline was in 1983 because I was 12 and I didn't live in New Jersey. But I can tell you that the idea behind builder's remedy is that if the town is being recalcitrant and refuses to allow for that reasonable opportunity that we talked about before, a developer can come and they can sue and they will win. They might not get 25% inclusionary zoning. They might only get 15 or 20%, that number that you cited for one in 4 homes being affordable to very low income or moderate income folks. Those are usually by town, like the decision for what that percentage is going to be is based on available land, population, jobs, job creation, the kind of industry in a community. So there's a little bit of negotiation that happens there. Now, I don't know what it was in 1983. I'm just being honest. But the process now is that if a town is not participating prior, to this, it was with the Council on Affordable Housing, and now if they're not participating in this, in the new methodology and the program that is being established or is established at the Department of Community Affairs, that builder's remedy still exists. So if there is a town that does not, pardon?
We need the builder's remedy to stay in effect.
Well, there's a carrot and a stick, right? You get safe harbor as a municipality if you participate and if you negotiate with the state government and with the other interested stakeholders, and you can come up with a number and you make a reasonable effort to meet that number so that everybody has the homes that they need, because that's what this really is about. Then you're protected from that builder's remedy and you can't be sued. So that's an important distinction, right? That's the carrot. That's what the legislation and the court calls safe harbor. And if you don't participate and you just refuse to do anything, then you're very likely as a municipality going to get sued by a developer for not participating and not providing any reasonable opportunity for those developers to build the homes that people need. I was at a forum on Friday, which feels like 300 years ago, where a for-profit developer said, he and his firm prefer to do business in places where they are welcome and where they're not going to have to sue, and where the town wants them to be there. And that's great for those towns and those developers. But there are lots of towns who maybe don't want to build or create a reasonable opportunity, a realistic opportunity for those developments to be built. And so that's why we need this kind of case law and legislation, because the market is not perfect. The market is not going to always deliver to everybody equally everywhere. So we need interventions like a builder's remedy, to make sure that the market is meeting the needs of all of our residents, even if we need a little government shove along the way. I'll push to make sure that's being done right.
Well, you have stated it so succinctly and accurately, because when you talk about the carrot and stick, the carrot can be the incentive to follow the process and for a municipality to provide its fair share of affordable housing. The stick is if a town is recalcitrant, you need that stick of the builder's remedy.
You need something because otherwise otherwise it would be an unenforceable law, right? I should correct myself. It's a realistic opportunity, not reasonable. So this is why I'm not actually a professor.
Well, it's realistic and reasonable both. They can go
Yeah,
hand
I mean,
in
I
hand.
think I just want to be accurate, as
Hey, I
accurate as
call
I
my
can.
producer Doc. I can call you Dr. Berger. Like I
You'd make
just
my mother very, very happy.
well, I just gave you a PhD that I have no authority to give out except on this show.
The best kind. I'll take it.
Okay.
But I do think that goes to what, former Governor Kane was concerned about was, this boogeyman that is not real. I mean, there's an industry that can provide homes. People need somewhere to live. I mean, we live in one of the wealthiest states in one of the wealthiest countries in the history of humanity ever. And we have people who are living on the street because we cannot figure out how to make sure that everyone has a safe, affordable place to call home. And it is repugnant and gut-wrenching and heartbreaking that our Supreme Court last year ruled that communities can actually outlaw people living outside if they have nowhere else to go. If they have nowhere else to go. Like if the town doesn't provide, or the municipality or county doesn't provide any kind of shelter they can access, a town can still assess fines and jail time to somebody who is sleeping on the street, even though that town doesn't have an obligation to make sure that they have a safe place to live. So if we have people willing to build homes and people who need homes, we need to make sure that the folks who are in between those two entities are paying attention to what the needs are and what the opportunities are. We don't have to have, we don't have to have a situation where somebody doesn't have a place to go. We know that there is enough demand and there's enough supply if we build it to make sure that there's enough places for people to live. And that's what our members do. They go to the places that are not easy. They're for the most part, nonprofit developers who are working day in and day out in places that the private sector doesn't always want to come, and where the government has not been able to do that work, or is not interested in doing that work, or doesn't want to. I mean, the Faircloth Amendment in Congress outlawed additional public housing under President Reagan. And so it's really been a hodgepodge of creative, innovative, entrepreneurial, nonprofit developers doing a lot of really difficult work in a lot of places where people desperately need a safe, affordable place to live. And to your point about environmental justice, one of the things that I'm most excited about in the housing industry is that we have really come a long way in addressing lead poisoning in children, which is part of what I've been working on for my whole career, one way or another, in one facet or another, is that we have a lot of dilapidated housing, and that housing is dangerous for children and pregnant people. And we need to make sure that we are investing in the rehabilitation, not just the creation of new homes, but also the rehabilitation of existing properties so that people can live in a home that's safe. We want to make sure that folks have a place to raise their families that's not accidentally or unknowingly providing, poisoning them. And we know that it's a solvable problem. And we have finally, under the Murphy administration, a tremendous amount of credit to him and Senator Ruiz and other stakeholders in our legislature for setting aside the funding to get this done. Started by Ron Rice 20 years ago, almost 30 years ago. May he rest in peace. But Senator Rice, led the fight to address lead poisoning in childhood lead poisoning in our homes, and through changes in the way that we rehab places, there are now resources to do that. And so that's really, that is a very big step in the right direction, because if we can keep people stably housed where they are, it means that we can open up additional homes for people who need them.
What you just said about lead poisoning really hit home with me, because let me tell you a little bit of a personal episode I experienced as Administrator of Region 2 EPA. The schools were in various, minority areas, were a terrible source of lead poisoning. These were old schools, hadn't been, due to racism, due to economic discrimination, hadn't really been upgraded for years. And all of a sudden, stories, well, I shouldn't say all of a sudden, it had been growing like a crescendo. Stories were appearing about how students, particularly elementary school students, would go to, I guess, what do they call it? The little grates in between the little gaps in between the various blocks. And they were taking lead out of there and licking it. This was like sure poison. So
Yeah,
I
no,
get,
lead tastes good. It tastes good to children. I mean, it's sweet. It's why they,
yes,
it's one of
that's not a
it's
joke. That's the
no,
truth.
it's not a joke at all. It's terrifying. And it comes in paint chips and dust, and a toddler walks by, and you know, especially under 5 years old, it's very, very, very toxic. It's toxic at any age. There's no safe level of lead. But in terms of environmental justice and housing, that has been an intersection for a very long time that I feel like we have finally started to move the needle on, and that's progress. So we'll take that.
Well, I got a phone call at that time. I made an announcement that we were going to take concerted action regarding the schools. I get a phone call from a very fine man, Joel Klein, who was the Chancellor of Education of the city of New York. He called and thanked me. He said, yes, this is what we need to do. We need to have a partnership between the environmental authorities and the various educational institutions. And he and I, from that point on, worked together on this. It was delightful to work with him. And I think an organization like yours encourages these kind of partnerships. Whatever the stakeholders are, Staci Berger will be there to promote partnership because no one entity can do it all by themselves.
No, and it's really our members from Camden to Newark and Patterson and Monmouth County, all over the state that are doing the rehab work and making sure that those homes are made safe for families. Lead poisoning is entirely preventable. It is not curable. It is much more cost efficient and better for everyone if we solve it before a child gets poisoned. We should not be using children as lead detectors. That's really had been the policy in New Jersey for the longest time, was that we waited till a child got poisoned and then we went and checked the house, which is not a good way to do. It's not a good way to do healthcare policy, and it's not a good way to do housing policy, and it's terrible for that family and that child. And so we've been able to move the needle on that somewhat, and that's some success that we can all be really proud of. So thank you for starting that.
Well, you know what? By moving the needle, you created a better environment for all New Jerseyans. I would add this on in terms of affordable housing. The initial purpose, and it should always be the purpose, would be to remove barriers, discriminatory barriers against people of color and minority groups to have their share of the American dream, to be able to get affordable housing. But I think you're serving another good purpose right now. Now, I don't know. I think this is intentional. I say that lauding you in a very high way. I don't know how young people are able to move into New Jersey and afford housing. And I'll tell you why I say this. I live in a development in Highland Park. I'm very happy with my apartment. I live in a nice area. And but for young people to move into apartments, let's say in Highland Park, the rents are very expensive. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the landlords, but the cost of housing really goes up. Now, candidates are out there. The big buzzword this year in New Jersey politics is affordability. Everyone is talking about affordability. Everyone is talking about how we need to lower taxes, which is all fine and good as long as we don't gut our budgets, okay? But here's the thing, housing affordability is more important even than taxation. And by promoting housing affordability, I think you are also benefiting young people who need starter residence, whether rental or purchase. I think you're serving that cause as well.
Well, I live next door in Piscataway, so it's nice to be in Central Jersey. Nice to have Central Jersey folks on the Zoom.
Well, we'll have to have dinner sometime in Highland Park. I keep
Absolutely. Well,
kosher.
Piscataway, we have places to eat here too. But a couple of things on that. So yes, affordability is definitely, a buzzword, and we've heard a lot about it for a long time, actually, especially in the housing sector. There are a couple of things to just note about that. One, when Governor Christie eliminated the Council on Affordable Housing, he also elevated the diversion of the state's Affordable Housing Trust Fund to what I would call an art, really. I mean, John Corzine started it, and it has been something that both parties, not Governor Whitman, But since, after her, John Corzine took a little bit of money from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is the largest source of subsidy for nonprofit and some for-profit developers building affordable homes. Governor Christie drained that fund of $1 billion over a decade,
Wow,
just about a
he was
decade.
a great disruptor, and because of what
Yeah,
he
I mean, it was not good. It was not good for the housing industry, and it also means that we are missing about 130,000 affordable homes for people who need them. So we have this huge pressure on our market and no resources for a decade to make that better. And then you have the pandemic and all of the ancillary inflationary costs that have gone along with that. And so we are behind the eight ball, which is why we need to make sure that towns are allowing the creation of homes that people can afford. Or wherever they are, they need to participate in this process because we are short those homes, and we want to make sure that people who need them get them. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that pressure on the market then creates, supply and demand. There isn't enough supply, so the demand makes the price that much higher. So we have that decade of disinvestment and lack of building. Somebody who was on this panel with me on Friday also showed a chart of housing starts, and you can see the money goes down and then all the housing starts go down. So we have worked really hard with the Murphy administration to keep the money in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That was part of the commitment that Governor Murphy made in his first term, and we have held him to it, even when it's been difficult for his administration. And sometimes, we've had to get our advocacy hat on and make sure that happened. And so we've gone to the legislature and urged them to continue that work. And we hope that this year will be another year where nobody diverts money from the Housing Trust Fund, but we also need more money to do other things to help folks make housing more affordable. And so there's a proposal that we are supporting, that we're advocating for, to increase the realty transfer fee on mansion sales over $2 million and to take a portion of that funding that would come in to do a couple of things, primarily to provide additional down payment assistance to first generation and first time homeowners. Our state housing mortgage finance agency has a program where they do that. They provide down payment assistance of up to $22,000, I believe it's $22,500 for first generation homeowners and first time homeowners. There's a little bit of a difference depending on how much money's in the program and what people qualify for, but I think it's between 17,000 and 22,000 for folks to be able to make a down payment on a home. And then there's also a proposal to increase the eviction filing fee in New Jersey. Do you know what the eviction filing fee is?
No, please explain.
It is $50. A landlord who wants to evict a family or a tenant for non-payment or anything else only has to pay $50 to get their case heard in court.
Well, that encourages these kind of exclusionary litigations. It's terrible for young people.
It's terrible for young people. It's also terrible for older people. Young
I'm on
people
the
are
older
moving in or
people.
moving out of their home, but older people, I'm headed in that direction. Older people want to downsize. Maybe they don't want to live in a big home. I had a neighbor here who just actually moved to Highland Park for precisely that reason. She sold her home and she's living in a lovely apartment in Highland Park, but it is really expensive, like crazy expensive. And so you keep people in their, if you keep people in their 3 or 4 bedroom home that they would otherwise sell, you then depress the market even more, because if folks can't afford, if they're not going to move out to find something more affordable when they're older and they don't maybe need as many bedrooms and they don't need a full, they don't need a 2-car garage because it's just one person or 2 people with 1 car. The market is out of whack because you can't, those folks can't move into an apartment because they can't afford the rent. It's not that they don't have the credit or that they don't want to live in a larger home. They just don't need it. So why would they continue to pay for more house than they need? They go to sell it. They can't necessarily sell it. They can sell it, but they can't necessarily get into something smaller for less money. So that creates a financial disincentive to sell. So that brings down the housing stock as well. So we've got all of this pressure on people. And if we don't make apartments in particular more available and more affordable, it's going to be hard to shake the market out a little bit. So this creating a disincentive or changing the incentive from making it very, very easy to evict people to making it a little harder, because it really ought to be something that is very, very serious when you're taking someone's home away, whether it's an apartment or a condo or a home that they're renting, single family home that they're renting, it is their home. And when you are taking someone's home away, for any reason, that is traumatizing for that person. It is traumatizing for anybody who is around them. And it's very inexpensive in New Jersey. We have one of the lowest filing fees in the country. I think it's lower than Mississippi, Kentucky, Alabama. It's lower than some places that you would think would be much less expensive because they're just less expensive states overall. But we are a high cost state with a very low eviction filing fee, and that incentivizes landlords to abuse that. And I'm not saying that all landlords do that, but we know that some of them do. And given the heightened concern around immigration and ICE raids in our state, we have heard that landlords are threatening people with eviction and ICE calls if they don't pay a higher rent than they were already paying. So not everybody does that, but there are some very bad apples, and we need to get a handle on how our eviction process is being manipulated. So the proposal that's in the legislature right now would raise that filing fee to $150. Frankly, I would add a zero onto that, but we're not there yet. But that differential that would be collected would be used to help people stay out of eviction court, to get a mediated agreement with their landlord if they need one, to help our state's very successful eviction prevention and protection program have more resources. That was stood up under Governor Murphy in the early days of the pandemic. And I just want to say with all my heart that the folks at the Department of Community Affairs who had been doing that work to try to keep people safely and stably housed during an unprecedented moment in history have done a tremendous job. And we should be putting more resources into those programs and not less. So we currently don't have an emergency rental assistance situation. So if somebody is short a couple $100s on their rent, it's really up to private nonprofits and charities to figure out how to cobble something together. Otherwise, that person can become evicted. They then become homeless. Then the state and the county have to figure out how to keep them safely and stably housed so they're not living on the street, because that is unsafe for them and for other people. And so it winds up costing us something somewhere. But it's really a problem of supply and demand. And it's also that landlords are taking advantage of the situation in some cases. And so we want to make sure that we're not creating a situation. We don't have a situation where it's very easy and affordable to move people out of their home. We want it to be, it should be reasonable. It has to have some rationality to it. Evictions are they're policy failures. There's a sign that we are not doing enough and not doing enough right to keep people in the place that they are already. Because every time somebody gets evicted, we then have to find another place for that person to live.
I know exactly how your
it's just cheaper to keep somebody in the home that they're in, even if it means we have to give folks a couple $100s to meet their rent. Most people in New Jersey, the overwhelming number of people in New Jersey, do not have more than $200 or $300 or $400 in their savings account. If they had an emergency, many people are one paycheck away from eviction, or choosing between fixing their car and paying their rent or heating their home and eating. That is no way for a civil society as successful as ours to function.
I know exactly how your friend feels. I have a very good landlord, but rents are expensive, and I have good services provided to me. But I'm a senior citizen. I have savings, I have pensions, Social Security. So I can afford it. A lot of people cannot afford it. And so you're doing a service to young people moving into the state. But the last segment of this show, and I'll keep it short, we're delighted you were able to spare some time to come. What concerns me, and I will not mention names of politicians or political parties, this has the potential of being a very ugly political issue. One of the things that was eliminated in the past, which I was delighted for, was the old regional contribution agreement, where towns would pay another town to take their share of affordable housing. This basically thrusted people from suburbs into crowded cities. It prevented people who wanted the opportunity to buy in suburban areas, not so congested, and it forced them into urban areas that already had density programs, although I certainly promote housing in urban areas as well. But this is the era of Trump. This is the era where racism and racist dog whistles are predominating in our politics. When Donald Trump would say, hey, this is big government. This is wrong, that there should be a council on affordable housing as it used to be, that there should be Mount Laurel remedies. So candidates are going to issue a lot of dog whistles out there, and they're going to say, oh, we're not racist. They remind me of the way Louisa Day Hicks was years ago in Boston, who was for school segregation, anti-busing, and she would say, I'm not a racist. What's that? I'm sorry.
I said I'm from Massachusetts. I'm familiar.
Well, there you go. So I think this has the potential to become a very big political issue. Now, I'm not asking you to promote or oppose any candidate, but are there political action groups out there, which you can't take part in? Are there political action groups who champion the cause of affordable housing and maybe give assistance to candidates who promote this agenda? Because I haven't seen that, and I think that's needed.
Well, I haven't. I'm not gonna direct you to a specific
No,
organization,
you
but there
can't.
are
I'm
some,
not asking you to.
right, but there are some. And I think that they will be active, and I also think that this is something that we have seen dog whistles about in New Jersey for the last decade and a half, right?
Absolutely.
We've heard 20 years. We've heard elected officials from both parties talk about not changing the character of somebody's community, right? I mean, that's not subtle. We've had people use the term high density housing as a dog whistle or just an outright whistle, to try to make people concerned about the number of folks in their community. And so we've seen that. I've seen that from both parties. So I think that really the thing is the thing that we need to focus on is that housing affordability affects everybody, whether it's a family that their child can't move back to the community that they grew up in because they can't find a place to live there, whatever they're raised, it's just expensive and they can't just simply cannot afford to come back after they've, gone to college somewhere and lived somewhere else for a couple of years. They can't afford to buy and they can't afford to rent. And so we've seen families from every part of New Jersey experience housing unaffordability. And I think that there's a real opportunity for our state and our potential next governor, everybody who's running, to talk about what they're actually going to do to make housing more affordable for all of us.
I think
Because it isn't.
affordability in housing is going to be a huge issue this fall. Was there anything I left out on the regional contribution agreements?
No, the only thing I would add to that, and it's not that it was, I just think it's important for people to know that it wasn't so much that, communities said, oh, we're going to send this housing to a community, a different community. It's that they would send money. So they paid off
That's
other
right.
communities to take their obligation, but they also only paid them pennies on the dollar. So you couldn't actually build anything with the amount of money that was being spent. So it created.
It was a ripoff on the towns that were getting the responsibility
That's
of
right.
this housing.
There were not even that many towns that participated in regional contribution agreements. There were a few, and they got a lot of money, but they didn't get it from the vast majority of towns. And so it wasn't a successful model, and it really, it did more harm than good because it prevented people who wanted to build and create homes in suburban communities from doing that, and really, kept the institutional and structural racism that we've been experiencing in New Jersey, which we're one of the most diverse states in the country, but we're also one of the most segregated states. And that comes down to housing and education. And those two things are very closely related.
So I will close with this on the regional contribution agreements. They were basically frauds, and they worked to the disadvantage of people who really needed affordable housing. And it worked to the disadvantage of the urban communities who all of a sudden had this responsibility thrust upon them. You gave them suburban towns gave them the responsibilities without the wherewithal. Staci, this has been a great show.
I was going to say, former Speaker Joe Roberts called it blood money, and that was the best capturing of that process that I have experienced yet.
Well, Staci, you did the people of New Jersey, as you do every day, a service by championing the cause of affordable housing. I will probably, as we get into the fall, beg you to come back if you can fit this into your schedule. But
happy to do it anytime. Please don't hesitate. I've enjoyed this very much, and I look forward to continuing to talk with you.
I'm delighted and I'm honored. Staci Berger, one of the true heroes of equality, one of the true heroes of civil rights, one of the true heroes of affordable life in New Jersey, a hero of mine, a hero of New Jersey. Thank you so much, Staci, for appearing on our show this evening.
Thank you so much for having me, Alan. That's extremely generous. I really, I
don't give
appreciate
praise
very
that
much.
Generously, so I will.
I'm a little verklempt. I'm not going to lie. That's
okay.
It's a lot. Well, Thank you very much.
We know what
very
verklempt is. Okay. Okay. That concludes our show this evening. It's been a great show. Again, I thank Staci Berger. I thank our producer and director of the show, Dr. Jonathan Yaris, who is also our in-house expert on education. Have a great week, and I'm going to be celebrating all week Fly Eagles Fly. Thank you very much,
Friday's
everybody.
the parade.
Yes, I couldn't make the parade last night, but I wouldn't have got back in time for the show. They are still parading and cheering in Philadelphia.
I think the official parade is Friday, so you've got time to plan.
Oh, geez, oh man, I'm a Sabbath observer. I don't know if I'll get back on time. They didn't consult me before the parade.
Me either.
There you go. Staci, friend of New Jersey, thank you so much. And that concludes our show. And we have a number of shows in the offing on issues like medical care and taxation that we will be proud to bring you. I'm Alan Steinberg. I'm the voice of dynamic political centrism. Have a great week, folks. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for the latest edition of Dynamic Political Centrism. Check back each week for our newest episodes, and you can catch past episodes online via YouTube and Spotify, and please subscribe to our Substack.